Getting started. Okay, we are recording, and I just want to note that we are the few, the proud, the bitter enders. So this is great. Thanks for being here, everybody. And it's going to end up having been almost a year since we started. Did I didn't mark it in the book.
222.
222. Okay, we're not going to get to a year. You know, we're gonna get to 11 months, but we're not going to get to a year. Actually, I think maybe one more, maybe two more. If you guys want, we can go ahead and do the little coda that he has on the Thomas Merton. What did he call it?
A meditation on
a poem. So we can do that if you like, and that'll probably get us out one more session. But we are just about finished here. This is the actual final chapter before he does his little epilogue there. Anything anybody wants to bring up from last week or this week between sessions before we get into it? All righty then. Based on what we were ending up talking about last week, because we're talking about mirroring, and the mirroring as a concept wasn't coming real clear, and Lindy brought it up, and actually there is no Lindy here. There's only a Zoom user here, but it looks like Lindy.
What?
You're a Zoom user.
Oh, again?
Probably because you're using your phone, it probably defaults to that. It's okay. We know who you are.
Okay.
Anyway, so Lindy, you were asking, you know, about this mirroring idea, and it really wasn't coming clear. And so I wanted to try to have some other information today to see if we can make the concept a little clearer. And there really wasn't any in terms of the way that Rohr seems to be using the term. So here's what I want to do. Let's start on page 156, and I want to read that first full paragraph and then skip down to the last paragraph, and then just see if we can talk through this a bit so that we can understand a little bit better where he's going with this, because it's an important concept, and it's what he's ending with. Everything right now in this last chapter is driving toward this idea of mirroring and reflecting. So that first paragraph, full paragraph in 156, by the second half of life, you learn to tell the difference between who you really are and how others can mirror that or not. This will keep you from taking either insults or praise too seriously. I doubt whether this kind of calm discrimination and detachment is much possible before your mid-50s at the earliest. How desperately we need true elders in our world to clean up our seeing and stop the revolving hall of mirrors in its tracks. Okay, so the key sentence there, I think, is at the top. By the second half of life, you learn to tell the difference between who you really are and how others can mirror that or not. Skip down to the last paragraph on that page. In the second half of life, you gradually step out of this hall of revolving and self-reflecting mirrors. You can usually do this well only if you have one true mirror yourself, at least one loving, honest friend to ground you, which might even be the utterly accepting gaze of the friend, capital F. But by all means, you must find at least one true mirror that reveals your inner, deepest, and yes, divine image. This is why intimate moments are often mirroring moments, a beautiful mutual receptivity, and why such intimacy heals us so deeply. Okay, where's he going with this? When I was trying to find the psychological concept of mirroring that he's talking about, when you speak of mirroring in psychology, generally what it's talking about is the largely unconscious phenomenon of one person mimicking another person. I mean, physically, mirroring everything that they're doing as if they were looking at them in a mirror. So if they cross their arms, then you would cross your arms. But this isn't what's happening consciously. It's a symbiosis kind of thing that's going on. If they smile, you smile. If they cross their legs, cross your legs. You start to mirror the voice inflection and tone and pacing, all of that. And so that would be mirroring. And it happens as people get either closer to each other or they are attracted to each other or whatever, but a lot of this mirroring takes place. So he's sort of talking about that, but at a deeper level. It's not just reflecting what the other person is doing, their inflection or pacing, or even pacing of their breathing, but actually reflecting back to a person what they really are, who they really are. But they can't do that accurately unless they have gotten to the point in their own life where they are no longer projecting. And here's the other concept between mirroring and projecting. So projecting is taking undesirable feelings, undesirable emotions, and projecting them onto the other person. Now, what we're basically talking about here is your shadow stuff, right? That unconscious material, whether it's positive or negative. So if it's negative, that shadow stuff that you don't like in yourself, but you sort of unconsciously know is there, you will pick it out of the other person and project it onto them. It's kind of, in a way, it's psychological scapegoating, but you're projecting onto them those undesirable elements in yourself. And that's what you would criticize. That's what you would insult. That's what you would denigrate. That's what you would discriminate against, and so on and so forth. But when we talk about the shadow, shadow can also be positive. Remember, shadow isn't just what's negative, antisocial, dysfunctional in you. It's whatever was unacceptable to the original groups that you grew up in. And so there can be positive traits in there as well that were unacceptable at the time. And so you repress them and put them down into shadow. So who are the people that we idolize? Who are the people that we put up on the pedestal? Who are the people that we are fawning all over and praising? But those are the people that we're projecting on the qualities that either we think we would like to have, or that we know we somehow have and aren't living up to our potential. It's a really interesting psychological concept of projecting onto other people these traits of our own. That's all done unconsciously. So until we have grown to the place that we have moved beyond projecting, because we have now actually become aware of our shadow, we've done the shadow work, we're aware of our shadow, and we have integrated it into ourselves. Now we can actually mirror back a person as they are, because we can actually see them as they are. We're no longer seeing them through the filter of our own shadow stuff. We're actually seeing the person, and we can be an accurate reflection back of who they really are. In the second half of life is where then we learn to distinguish between whether someone is mirroring us accurately, or whether they are projecting onto us their own stuff. And the only way we're going to be able to distinguish what is happening from the people that are in front of us is by knowing who we really are, which can only happen when we've done our own shadow work. We've gone through this process of, as Jesus would say, becoming free. We have finally known the truth because we've followed the way of Jesus. And now we know the truth, and the truth has made us free of all of this unconscious material that is always dragging us around by the nose, the tail wagging the dog, and disallowing us from being able to see what's really there. So as he moves forward and he continues to develop this, he's going to be telling us that the only way that we develop a true sense of self is through this mirroring process. In other words, we don't see ourselves by ourselves. The same way we can't see our own faces. We have to see them in reflection. We don't really see our true self, except as it's mirrored back to us through others, and ultimately through God.
I have a question, Dave.
We can't, just a second. We can't do that though until we've gotten far enough in our own work, that second half of life work. Okay, Tony, fire away.
Well, in terms of your point about projection, I get that, and I agree with that. But your last statement when you said, until, if I got this right, let's see, unless you see yourself being mirrored, I guess, by someone, you can't, I can't get my thoughts together on that. I guess what I was trying to get at is this: if he's saying you can't see your true self until you can see yourself being mirrored by others, and whether they're mirroring you, your true self, versus, you know, they're not mirroring you, but more mirroring themselves. I don't understand how that works.
Okay, and I get that. Let's read the next paragraph at the top of page 157. He's going to develop this a little bit further, and then we'll see if this helps at all. He says, thinking you can truthfully mirror yourself is a first half of life illusion. Mature spirituality has invariably insisted on soul friends, gurus, confessors, mentors, masters, and spiritual directors for individuals and prophets, and truth speakers for groups and institutions. So you see where he's going with this? In other words, we need people who have become true elders, people who have already worked past their own projections and past all of the stuff that would make them cloudy mirrors for us. And as we work with them, they are mirroring back who we are. And we can see that in that relationship with them. We can see that reflected back with them. This is the point he's making. So as we're doing our spiritual work, we're not doing it by ourselves. We're doing it with others. And we are getting back from them their impressions of us, but it may be clouded by their own projections. As we get clearer and clearer as we move through this, as we work with people who are clear, we can see more and more of who we are. Now, at first, we're not going to like what we see, right? We're going to be reflecting, they're going to be reflecting, if they're a true mirror, if they're clear, they're going to be reflecting back us with all our flaws still in place, with all the work that's left undone. And that's going to give us the ability then to work on those issues and become a better and better mirror ourselves. So eventually we can reflect back to others with the same kind of clarity. That's what he's talking about in terms of this exchange. Now, ultimately for us as followers of Jesus, Jesus is that mirror for us. Now, we don't have him right in front of us, and we do need people that are physically right in front of us, but at least Jesus can hold up a mirror in terms of his way of living, you know, the way of life that he is projecting, or that he is presenting for us, is a mirror that we can hold up to ourselves and start to see. But we do need people in our lives as well. Now, this is the position he's taking, and obviously you can agree with it or not, but at least I hope that it's starting to get clear. Questions still?
It seems to me like he's going a long way around simply saying that there are people out there who you can glean understanding from, and I think maybe as they're reflecting to you, I don't know what truths. I think you get aware of that over time, but it sounded like what you're saying is that you can't really get to know yourself, until you have someone like that, which I agree. But it seems to me you have to have a lot of pre-understanding to know what that mirroring is about.
No, I don't think so. I don't think you need to understand the concept as much as you need to live it out. I think it can happen without a lot of intellectual understanding. It can happen naturally in the relationships, But remember that our true self is meaningless in isolation. See if this helps. That's why he said that thinking you can truthfully mirror yourself is a first half of life illusion. We think in the first half of life, or if we were just operating within our egoic consciousness, that we can imagine who we are. We can build that concept of self for ourselves in isolation and away from everyone and everything else. And what he's saying, that's an illusion. Our true self is only going to make any kind of sense or have any sort of meaning to it in relation to and in relationship with ultimate reality that we call God, but also in relationship to each other. You know, our true self is always in relationship and connected. When Jesus made his greatest statement of identity, he said, I and the Father are one. It wasn't an identity that stood on its own. It was an identity that was reflected in the Father. He said, I don't do anything except what the Father tells me to do. You know, I don't do anything of my own initiative except what is flowing through me from the Father. And so his ultimate idea of his true self and his identity was rooted in connection and in reflection. And so our identity is going to be the same. When we are really getting down to the true identity, it won't be in isolation. It won't be just in the confines of our heads. It will be in relationship, in dynamic relationship with other in some way, shape, or form. And so the only way we're really going to understand that is in this reflection, in this relationship. I know I'm throwing a lot of words at this, trying to get this across, and I don't know if it's getting any clearer or I'm just stirring up more stuff at the bottom of the aquarium.
No, it makes sense. I'm sorry. Did you want to say something, Linda?
No, you go.
So reading Thomas Keaton, Human Condition, and if anybody's interested, by the way, it's only 45 pages. I like 45 pages. I'll do that one day. But his last sentence is, if we have not experienced ourselves as unconditional love, we have more work to do, because that is who we really are. Well, how the heck do I know I'm unconditional love if I'm not in relationship with another human?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's another way to put it, isn't it?
Yeah. So anyway, that's how, just because I did finish that up in the last half an hour, but that's how I'm interpreting what you're referring to, Dave.
That's not bad. You know, if God is love, well, love always needs an object. You know, I think that's one of the reasons that we conceive of God as Trinity, because there's implied relationship within the Godhead. He's not just a one single solitary entity, but entities that are in motion, in dynamic motion and relationship. And I think that's kind of what you're saying there, you know, Randy. The only way we know we're in love is reflected in the relationship that we have with the beloved. And so that reflection, that mirroring is what is telling us who we are and showing us back how close are we getting to this unconditional love that is God.
Yeah. Well, and for myself, understanding powerlessness. I can't, there's a good friend of mine and stuff who's in a deep funk. The depression is a better word for it. And such. I can't fix him. I can be present, offer that anytime he wants to talk, I'm here for him. But I can't really do anything about it. He's got to process it. And to me, that's a form of unconditional love, if that makes sense. You know, I have to, again, if there's no conditions, I can be with him and love him enough to accept that this is beyond my power.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the healing we seek is always found in connection. You know, it's always going to be in connection to move through those difficult times. William, what were you going to say, buddy?
I was going to go in a slightly different direction, but I like that. I like that thought a lot. I was thinking about people who might not have had an actual person to provide this mirroring, particularly the positive type of mirroring that was implied in previous paragraphs. And I just love the idea of using Jesus as your mirror object, the way you described that earlier. And I think that fits with Randy, right? If it doesn't look like unconditional love, if you're not loving like Jesus, then that gives you the indications of where you need to make some adjustments, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, again, this is Keating, not me. I'm just pointing out something I read like a half an hour ago. But I do think it's applicable here again, how it has to be in relationship. Now, I mean, I could get too much in my head about this, but sure, you could be right. The relationship with Christ, But unfortunately for myself, I have a story, a narrative of Christ. It's not, well, I guess even with each and every one in this group, I have a narrative going on. But if you know what I mean, it's not look you in the eye relationship with Christ. I would say my relationship that I've described with Christ is much more a relationship with the Holy Spirit. If that makes sense, you know. So
then again, if you encounter a person who has never had any relationship or encounter with a person who's actually healthy, who actually has transcended these basic human fears and drives, what do you think the condition of that person is going to be? Children who come out of dysfunctional homes of origin tend to be very dysfunctional themselves, you know? And so it's like, if we don't really have any kind of modeling, and fortunately, that's what's happening in our society. You know, whole generations are growing up without good models, and we're seeing the effects of that. So yes, Jesus is the ultimate model for me, but I've needed some human ones in between as well. And I don't know if it can work in total absence of human models. I mean, I'm not saying it's not possible. When I was making the switch into this type of spirituality, I wasn't getting it from my home church. I wasn't getting the instruction from my home church. I stayed in community there because I love the community, but they were in another headspace. And so if all the people that were actually instructing me were Catholics rather than evangelicals, and most of them I was just reading in books, you know, maybe they were dead for centuries and some of them were still alive, but I'd never meet them. But I did have a few of these live mentors that I could go visit at Sarah Retreat. There was a couple of the priests there, and there was another priest that I talked to, and there were a few of them. And if I didn't have those actual live mentors that could ask me the penetrating questions and mirror back what they were seeing in me, I don't know if I could have made the transition fully. I mean, I'm not saying that I couldn't have, but it would have been a lot harder. And maybe not possible. I'm not really sure. So that's just something I'm thinking about, William, because what you brought up is like, yeah, could you do it just from a book? I don't know.
Well, the reason I'm thinking about this, it's like when we think of like the Enneagram work, when we talk about blind spots, it's been suggested in the Enneagram work that we all know what our blind spots are. We don't need somebody to, like, our blind spots are basically the things that we're avoiding, basically. The things we're avoiding dealing with, the things that are keeping us out of relationship and we're doing nothing about it, basically. And from that place, I feel like everyone has an inner wisdom of what direction they need to be moving in. You know, and I mean, I don't want to belabor this point. I'm in agreement with what you guys are saying, but I'm just thinking, what if Jesus is the ultimate mirror and we know what we need to work on in relation to our blind spots as we move in the direction of this model?
But if that were true, William, would you and I have a job? I don't know, man. I mean, a blind spot is a blind spot. I mean, that means you can't see it, you know, and yeah, I think, you know, obviously we can work through maybe some blind spots on our own, but to have somebody who can actually mirror those back to us, point those out to us, you know, criticize us where we really do need to be criticized, but in a constructive way, of course, but really show us, you know, what the heck is going on? Why do you think you keep banging your head against this particular tree? Why do you think you never get any further? Why do you, like Paul, say all the things I want to do, I don't do, and the things I don't want to do, I do? And, you know, what a wretched man I am, because I can't seem to break free of these things, except if someone can actually mirror back and show us this is the X over the treasure on your map. Start digging here, and stop
Right.
just digging holes. I think that's the where he's really going with this, and what he's trying to show us about this mirroring. But the problem is there are
Yeah.
so few people who can mirror clearly, because what they're giving us back are really projections of their own stuff. And that is not helpful, and until we can start to distinguish between the two, we're always going to be led around by the praises and the insults of others, and we're not going to get any closer to where we really need to be digging. And so
Right.
it's a kind of a participation in this. As we get clearer ourselves, as we move into second half of life work, we can start to distinguish the health of the person who's mirroring us. But we do need those healthy mirrors in order to even start the work in the first place. And it really is a communal function to a certain degree, at least. So
Yeah,
that's where he's going with it.
And I think, I don't know if Tony was leaning in this direction, but I'm just thinking of so many of the clients that I'm working with where, I might do some mirroring in my work naturally, I suppose, but I would say for the most part, like there are at least 3 or 4 of them that has never had a single person in their lives that might provide this kind of healthy mirroring. And my fantasy is that they would be able to tap into some spiritual vein that allows them to bridge that gap and move into the second half of life.
Yeah, but William, that's why they're in your office.
I know, but that aside, if they never met me, I wouldn't think that they'd never, you know what I mean? And I don't want to take any credit for whatever I mean there. But
Well, in my hypothesis also is there's only so much we can discern. I mean, I remember Dave, first time like we were really having one-on-one conversations, he said, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Well, I've been fortunate that I've had many teachers in this spiritual path. And looking back, yeah, they provided a stepping stone to the next person. There's a lot of stuff that Dave talks about. If I didn't have those men before him and such, I would have just been like, what is this guy talking about? You cuckoo or something, So, and even frankly, in the discussions I have with Dave and still today, if we hadn't had discussions years leading up to some of this stuff, like again, reading Keating today, Keating, excuse me, I just realized yeah, it's human condition. I was ready to buy this book, and then Amazon reminded me I already had it in my bookcase. I have books in my bookcase that I don't remember, and I'm like going, cool, I can probably read this today. And I read it, and there was a whole new appreciation. I've had this. I'm sure I read it when I first bought it, but it's been like 7 years. So to some degree, again, in how this talking about having someone who can give you a clear reflection and such, until I'm even ready to look at the foggy reflection, So I guess what I was saying is, there's people that, unfortunately have never ever seen anybody that was emotionally healthy. I
guess I'm expanding this to now that you described the book there, it might be somebody you just meet and have a single conversation with, maybe.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
So it might be like you were saying, Randy, it's, steps building up. I was thinking about prolonged relationships and things of that sort. But yeah, it could be a single conversation, and I can definitely name a few people who have had those important kinds of interactions with that just stay with you for years,
In a way, are we kind of saying that, it doesn't kind of come back to the original thing that you've talked about, Dave, is just awareness. So the person grows up in a very dysfunctional world, has no real mentors in their life or any kind of, they don't know what they don't know. But how do they get this, I mean, I think there's still could be some core guttural instinct that that person has, that something about my life needs to be better. And I don't know what it is, but I'm searching for something that I don't know. And then maybe that teacher appears in a sense. But there's going to be some that walk through life that just don't even know, or don't even know that they want to be aware, or are aware, or should be aware. And so they just go through life as like a zombie or whatever. They don't really know because they've never been exposed. I suppose that both cases, I mean,
And that's what leads us to the concept of necessary suffering, right? What is going to tell us that there's something wrong? What is going to tell us that we need to change, that something needs to be different in our life? But the pain that is being caused by living the life the way we are. That's the whole thing. The pain, we progress at the pace of pain, right?
the pain gives a purpose at some point.
Well, it gives a motivation, that's for sure.
Motivation.
You know, I
Hopefully
better
it
take my
does.
hand off this stove because it doesn't feel good. And
Well,
it's gonna be the
and
same
one of
thing.
these men that helped me get to where I am today, Alan, he used to all the time talk about pain as the touchstone of all change, which was totally applicable at that time in our relationship. But eventually and it's so personal, I can't really say how I knew there was a divine unconditional love that was drawing me to get through the confusion and the uncertainties and the doubts. To some degree of blind faith, but not, I don't know, not a total blind faith. Again, seeing people in community of church and recovery in AA, the proverbial wanting what they have kind of thing. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they were, again, in my journey, these were not people that had been self-actualized and had cleared out all their baggage. They just were a little bit farther, 1-2 steps farther ahead of me in the journey. And that allowed me to be drawn to something, as opposed to being driven by pain. I was being drawn to something greater than I'd ever experienced before. So it's kind of a push-pull thing, at least it was for me.
That can work. So with all these words that we've thrown at this, Lindy, is it any clearer?
I get flashes of clarity and then I get confused again, to be honest. Reading over the mature spirituality has invariably insisted on soul friends, gurus, confessors, mentors, masters. I get that. You want to go to somebody that is more enlightened than you are to deal with your stuff. And prophets and truth speakers for groups and institutions. Yeah, I gravitate towards going to listen to people but they're, if I'm having a one-on-one with somebody, I'm going to somebody I have a lot of respect for, that I think you have something you can say and speak to my life to enlighten me further. But is that what mirroring is? And how do you know you have the right mentor or spiritual director? That is,
I think we can also go back to what William was saying. It doesn't have to be people that we seek out as gurus and mentors and spiritual directors. It can be people that we just meet along the way.
Yeah.
Remember that woman I keep bringing up, that the mother-in-law that moved to Las Vegas and lived the last 7 years of her life. And when she died, there was hundreds of people at her memorial service, from store clerks to people that she just met along the way. There was something in her that mirrored back that goodness for people, even in chance meetings. And of course, if she was coming into the store every day, they would get to know her better. But there was something in her that connected with people and caused them to sit up and take notice, and to take notice of themselves. I'm sure she left people better than she found them, even just going through the grocery line. And I think that's what William was trying to bring up. It doesn't have to be these long-term formal relationships. It can be things and times that we meet people. And so it can be a lot of different things, but I think we do need that. I mean, I know in my life, it has been these people that I can still remember, and I invariably know their names as well, because if I didn't just meet them, in a grocery aisle, that really made the difference for me, that were able to mirror back and ask the right questions. Emery could be brutal with this. I'd say something and he just shut me down with it, but he was mirroring back that this is a bias of yours. This is not, you're not barking up the right tree here. But he would have that ability, even just saying, stop. I can only tell you what I'm convinced of. You go become convinced of what you're convinced of. That was a mirroring moment for me, where I had to stop and realize what I was actually doing. And it didn't happen at the moment, but it happened as I continued to reflect on it. And I think we have these encounters with people when they are healthy, and when they are able to mirror back what it is that we are doing in our unself-awareness, that help us to grow. And I think that's what he's talking about. I mean, that's the best I can relate to it in my life.
I have a moment with my own sister where I feel like I'm just having a flash of what you're saying, because my sister is somebody that I know has been on a path that I was hesitant to be interested in. And then when I got interested, I knew, oh, she's been on this path for a while, and we had so much to be able to share with each other. And she's somebody, that will speak to me if she sees something that I'm getting wrong, or she might want to influence thing. This is where I think you're missing it. There was one moment, as an example, and you can tell me if I'm reading this right, but there was this young guy that I met that had a brain injury, and his mother was a real strong, they were a couple. She was always with him. He was deaf and blind, but he could communicate because she wrote on his forehead with her finger, and he could discern what she was saying. And then she would ask him to pray for people. So she'd write the question on his forehead, and then she would, all of a sudden he would start praying. He could speak. He'd had a brain injury. He just couldn't see or hear anymore. So this was like this miraculous kid. And I was so happy to meet him, because God was using this brain injured young man in such an amazing way, miraculous way. Well, the mother called me one day and she asked for prayer, just like early in the morning. I wasn't awake yet. And she was saying, he and I were out in a boat, and I let him get out of the boat. He just wanted to hang on to the edge of the boat. And I said, okay. He was able-bodied, but then he let go. And then I saw him swimming, and I thought, oh my gosh, you're swimming. And then he disappeared into the water, and he was missing. So this story unraveled, and they did find his body, and he died. And I was just beside myself. And I was talking to my sister, and I was saying to her, I think this hits me so bad because I just see the frailty of these people with brain injury. I think of Ryan, how frail he is. And Debbie said, but Lindy, we're all that frail. Just was like, just turned that mirror on me and said, you're not seeing how frail we all are at any moment. And it just was like, oh, I got to think about that for a while. That is true. It was a truth that I hadn't been considering. And it just made me realize my dependence on God even all the more, in such a profound way, that I think of people that are injured as being so vulnerable.
Mhm.
And that we're also vulnerable.
And I think that's exactly what we're talking about. Deb at that moment was able to mirror back to you something that you needed to understand.
Yeah.
And it took you further. Something just like that. On Sunday, I was telling the story of being in the monastery out of high school, and there for all the wrong reasons, and acting out and doing the things I did. And my closest friend there, who of all the postulants I thought was there for the right reasons. At one point, he just looks at me and says, "Why are you even here?" You know, and that was that mirroring moment where I had to actually confront, what the heck am I doing? You know, and why am I doing the things I'm doing while I'm here? Yeah, you know, and he mirrored back to me because he was able to see clearly the dysfunction that was going on, and I needed it at that moment. And that was the beginning and the end of my religious vocation. Yeah, but I think, yes, we can have moments like that with people we know and maybe with complete strangers. But there are moments of mirroring back. We can see in them ourselves, and maybe we don't like what we see, and then that's motivation for change, you know. But at least we recognize it as an authentic mirroring, not just a projection of their own problems and unfinished business, but an actual reflection of ourselves, and then we can work with that. But I think we need that back and forth. We need other humans in our life to be able to do this work. And that's certainly the premise that he's going on here. Let's read a couple more paragraphs and see. Were you going to say something again, Lindy?
Oh, I said, okay. Yeah.
Okay, let's read a couple more paragraphs, see if the development comes any clearer. So continuing on page 157, first full paragraph. My Franciscan sister, St. Clare of Assisi, seems to have found the mirror to be her most frequent and helpful image for what she saw happening in the spiritual life. She loved to advise her sisters to variously place yourself before the mirror. Let the light mirror you, and look upon the mirror of perfect love each day. She clearly understood that spiritual gifts are always reflected gifts. That's a great line. She clearly understood that spiritual gifts are always reflected gifts. Clare predated Heinz Kohut's psychology and our present knowledge of mirror neurons by 8 centuries. Mystics often intuit and live what scientists later proved to be true. So are you all familiar with self-psychology?
No.
I had to look it up. So the basic idea here of self-psychology, Heinz Kohut in the 60s, I think, came up with this. The idea is that the self is the center of the universe, the center of the psychological universe for each one of us. This idea of self, that's our ground zero, and everything revolves around that. But the self, our sense of self, is created through all the mirroring that takes place from our earliest childhood. So what is mirrored back to us as kids in our family of origin and the people that we are dependent upon at those early ages creates our sense of self. And that's what we have to work with as adults. And then all the junk that we have to unravel at that point is also done through a mirroring process, but hopefully with healthy adults. So if our childhood is healthy, if our parents and those around us are basically healthy, we can come out of childhood with a pretty solid sense of self, a good first half of life container to be able to work toward the second half of life eventually. But if it's very dysfunctional, then we're going to come up with a very damaged sense of self. That's going to be very difficult for us to work through, depending on the level of the trauma or the abuse or whatever dysfunction we have suffered as a kid. But that the self is developed through that mirroring process, through our connection with others. And this idea of mirror neurons is that they have actually found brain cells that react the same way, whether we are doing an action or someone in front of us is doing the action. And these neurons fire exactly the same, whether it's one of those two conditions. In other words, if someone else smiles, you know, it's our smile neurons are also firing at the same time. And we typically will smile, you know, in return. You know, someone yawns, we yawn. I don't know if that's part of it, but that's the idea here, is that these neurons are actually in there firing symbiotically with the person that we're with and who we're observing. And so we're kind of wired that way, you know, to respond to this mirroring. So let's finish this page. We really do find ourselves through one another's eyes, and only when that has been done truthfully can we mirror others with freedom, truth, and compassion. Jesus himself predated Clare by 12 centuries when he said, the lamp of the body is the eye. If your eye is healthy, your whole body will be filled with light. It is all a matter of learning how to see, and it takes much of our life to learn to see well and truthfully. In the second half of life, people have less power to infatuate you, but they also have much less power to control you or hurt you. Okay? So what does infatuate mean? I mean, we all think of it as falling in love or something like that, but really what infatuation is about, it's an intense but short-lived passion or admiration for another person. So in the second half of life, people are going to have less power to infatuate you, for you to project onto them, all of that admiration, all of that praise, part of your shadow stuff. But they're also going to have less control over you, less power to hurt you. It is the freedom of the second half not to need. Both the ecstatic mirroring of my youth and the mature and honest mirroring of my adulthood have held up what I needed to see and could see at the time. They have prepared me for the fully compassionate and divine mirror, who has always shown me to myself in times and ways that I could handle and enjoy. I fell many times relationally, professionally, emotionally, and physically in my life. But there was always a trampoline effect that allowed me to finally fall upward. No falling down was final, but actually contributed to the bounce. It's funny, he uses the trampoline image. For me, it's like when I was sinking in a pool and I felt myself sinking and starting to drown, the fastest way up was to go all the way to the bottom and push off from the floor of the pool. That was my kind of image that I had that corresponds to what he's talking about here with the trampoline. But that idea of, get to the bottom and push off. That's the fastest way up. As long as the pool's not too deep, I suppose. Those last few paragraphs, making anything clearer? Are you buying what he's selling here? Do you think it is a mirroring effect by which we actually grow and mature?
It's one of the tools.
What are the
There's a lot
others?
We'll be here all night. Life itself is a teaching tool. Like that statement, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. When the student is ready, the mirror appears. The mirror is always reflecting the life back to us and learning lessons back to us, but we have to be ready to receive them and see them.
Well, is that different than the mirroring he's talking about here? Do you think?
I don't think it is. I think the mirroring that he's referring to is the process of life itself, and the lessons we learn and the encounters we have and the situations we find ourselves in, and we either mirror what somebody's presently doing who's also involved in the situation, if we happen to be involved in it. If not, we find our mirrors from our memories and apply them to the situation and see what they reflect back.
I think I'm buying what he's saying. I like what he's saying, and the more everyone's talking, I can think of situations where I've been, mirrored by somebody that is pretty trustworthy and really told me stuff that sometimes icky stuff that I really didn't want to hear, but it was truthful, but it was done, in a dignified way that didn't scare me off necessarily, but did make me think about things. And I like the distinction between the mirroring, the projecting. That's very clear to me now, the differences, and it's very different. But I've seen both.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen both.
Yeah.
In this last part that you read, it really answered a lot of questions for me. And I totally agree with what's been said now. And but when you were talking about like that person who can just see you, and the first one that came to my mind was a professor that I had. He was a he taught philosophy and Eastern religion. And he was the first person that just looked me straight in the eye and said, "What do you know?" And where you could take that on a real surface level, but the way he said it, it just vibrated that this was a very deep question, and it was something to look at. And yeah, and I spent quite a few years studying with him, so he definitely mirrored a lot of good things to me.
That's great, Tony. That's a great example. Yeah. Just what we read on Sunday, right? Two followers of John the Baptist peel off to follow Jesus. Jesus sees them, turns around. What do you seek? You know,
Yeah,
asking the $64,000 question, you know, the incisive question. And then, you know, well, they're tongue tied. They don't want to say, well, where are you staying? Well, come and you will see. And the invitation to come deeper. You know, this is an example of mirroring. Jesus' non-answers are actually questioning the questioner, right? He may be asking a question in return to the question. He may tell a story. He may just give an invitation like he does here. But that is another way of mirroring, that dialectic, that Socratic method, you know, where the questioner is now forced into participating, you know, participation and a partnering. And not just passively looking for answers, but actually drawn into something deeper. And that also, I think, is a form of mirroring. And Jesus, of course, is brilliant at it. Well, I hope the concept is coming clearer. And because this really is, if we're talking about making a transition from the first or second half of life, how do we do it, right? And now what Randy said is also really important, that we are being prepared for epiphanies, you know, and awakenings by so many who have gone before. And maybe they were just glancing blows and things that didn't penetrate our force fields at the time, but they're sticking back there. And then when the student is really ready and this teacher appears, all of that other information kind of comes into play and snicks into place, and we start to realize that a new whole is assembling kind of before our eyes. And so it is a process, a lifelong process, but we do hit some significant milestones at times. But I think it is in the rough and tumble of just living life, as Scott says, that these mirrorings occur, and they build over time, and we start to realize more and more, and then we can start to actually see them coming, and then we realize we're at the place where we can now ask those penetrating questions of others, you know, and we can mirror back to them truthfully, without projecting our own stuff onto them. We don't need to do that anymore, because we're in a different place in life, and then the circle is complete, and we have become the elders, and we can help others in that way. But also, as Randy said, sometimes you only need to be a step ahead of the other to be able to show them something that they can't see in their own blind spot, and so there's that too. But it just becomes this beautiful dance almost, you know, of going through life and trading in these genuine human encounters back and forth. And as you start to see how that dance plays out, you can more and more intentionally join the dance.
Yeah, and enjoy the dance.
Amen to that. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna need a bigger mirror.
We're gonna need a bigger boat.
Exactly.
Hi, Judy. Judy snuck in, and Ellen snuck in too, both of you. Good to see you.
Made our baker's dozen.
We got our baker's dozen. That's great. Well, I think that's far enough for now. So what do we got? We just got another page and a half, I think. 2.5 pages left. And then the meditation on Merton's poem. That's another few pages. So yeah, we're getting right down to it. Everybody okay with doing the little meditation on Merton?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So we'll.
Have we given any thought to the next book, Dave? Like what you guys were thinking?
I've been given some thought, a few Sundays ago, I did a message that brought me back to Brother Lawrence. And we did Practicing the Presence of God probably 10 years ago or something like that, but it's been a really long time. And in rereading some of those pages, I was just struck again on the simplicity and the clarity of how he goes about this contemplative practice and exactly what we're talking about here. So I was thinking that would be a possibility for us to do some of Practicing the Presence of God. Maybe not the whole book, but certainly sections of it. We definitely want to do the letters, and we want to do the conversations, and maybe parts of the eulogy, just to get a sense of who he is and how he arrives where he arrives. So there's that. Gail was asking about doing the Universal Christ, but that's another Richard Rohr. And so I don't know if we want to do two Richard Rohrs in a row. And so there's that, or we can do a little bit of Brother Lawrence to cleanse the palate and then go back to Richard Rohr. Randy had asked if we could do some of the Fifth Way, my book. I wouldn't want to do it all, but we could do some selected passages out of that as well. So those are the three that I've been considering, but I'm kind of leaning toward Brother Lawrence to get really practical about how we go about doing what it is. We've been talking more kind of abstractly. I don't know. Any thoughts on any of that?
I would definitely love to go through either one of your books.
Okay.
Like your second one too, a lot. So, but pick one.
Okay.
No, I'm easy. I think Brother Lawrence is somebody I have never read, just heard you talk about.
Oh, you haven't? Okay, so it would be new to you.
New to me.
All right. Yeah, Brother Lawrence is a pivotal figure.
Yeah.
He's kind of my hero. I really move more toward his daily practice of presence at this point in my life than I do to dedicated times of prayer. So I've kind of moved in that direction until things get really hairy, and then I know I need to run back to some dedicated times again. It just kind of depends on where I'm at. I don't know. You asked the question, William. Any thoughts on all of this?
No, I'm agreeing with the Brother Lawrence thing. I mean, I wouldn't mind the Fifth Way again, but I've been through both the Fifth Way and the other one with you guys. So my preference would be to, try something new.
Okay. That works for me too.
So Dave, is Brother Lawrence is he kind of like the wax on, wax off, but in the kitchen?
Yes, he's the guy in the
Okay.
kitchen. He's the guy in the kitchen.
The guy in the kitchen.
Yeah.
I really could say that a little better, but yeah.
Okay.
And we'll all become better cooks after that book too, right?
No, not really. No.
No recipes? Okay. I'm
I
just
don't
kidding.
think 17th century peasant cuisine is really where you want to
Probably not that great. So
Yeah,
yeah.
probably not. Yeah.
Rice and potatoes.
Maybe a lot of goulash and stuff. So
Yeah, but it was a heavy fat and caloric diet at that point, probably. Lots of grease, lots of lard, and it probably tasted great. I don't know. Okay. That's enough for tonight. Let's Scotty, go ahead.
Father God, thankful that you're here with us and that we have another opportunity to be together and encourage each other in the things that you teach us and mirror into our lives as we grow and mature and walk this life out. Help us to be a good mirror for those that are in need of some reflection. Help us to bring counsel when asked for it from your chamber, right from your Holy Spirit, Lord. May we be investing in each other's lives from a spirit of love, led by your example. We pray all this in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, everybody. All right, we'll see you Sunday. And then next
thank
Tuesday.
you.
All
Good
right.
night, guys.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night, good night, good night. Good night, Lindy.
I'm looking for, oh, there it is.
Yeah, here we are. And then Jordana and Linda, okay? Linda, I'll
Okay.
see you Saturday. Jordana, you'll see us on Sunday.
Yes, I will.
Okay. One
Bye.
last Sunday alone and then you're back.
No, it's 2 Sundays.
I mean, 2 Sundays.
They're not back until the 4th of February. Don't we have 2 Sundays left?
No, I don't think so. This is the 3rd Sunday. And he only talked about 3 Sundays. So oh, but that is the 4th of February. 1,
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, 5th of February, actually.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think we'll be back the day after they come home. I think is when you should be back.
Okay, that's only this Sunday is the last Sunday you'll miss. And then you'll be
Okay.
back. Cool.
All right.
See, it's better
See you
than we
guys.
thought. Good
Bye.
night, everybody.
Bye.